Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Charles Henderson. I head South Pole's Climate Advisory Practice, and I'm your host for today's webinar. We're joined to discuss the very topical and important subject of targets and roadmaps for climate action. And we have a very distinguished panel of speakers who are here to not only present, but also to respond to your questions. And this comes at a very pivotal moment in climate action. The scientific imperative is very much ratcheting up. And if the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that it shows us what can happen when we overlook nature's ability to bite back. But it also gives us the perfect platform, the perfect opportunity to create a better future. So with that note, on that note, we're going to be hearing today not only about commitments to climate action, but fantastic case studies, including the practical action for delivery on the ground. So if we could just flick to our next slide, and again, so let's just start with some housekeeping points. You're all on mute at the moment as attendees. If you have a question or a comment, please submit it through the question box on the control panel. And if you experience any technical difficulties, please let us know and we'll do our best to support you. We'll aim to answer all of your questions on the presentation at the Q&A at the end of the webinar. However, we are going to take a couple of questions after the first two presentations. We may not, well, depending on the number of attendees, which I can see is already very high, we may not be able to get through all of your questions, but we'll do our best to put them into themes. This webinar is being recorded and we'll aim to get it to you within a week. Along with a link to download the presentation slides. Last but not least, as you will have noticed, and as we will all be very familiar with now, we're presenting from our homes, many of us, so please bear with us in case we have any technical hiccups or if the internet goes out and so on. Obviously, we'll do our best to resolve these. Okay, so first of all, let me just give you a little introduction to South Pole. We are a leading provider of global climate change solutions and services. And we number over 350 experts around the world across 19 offices and growing very fast. Our expertise covers advisory, climate advisory, data provision, solutions on sustainability risks and opportunities. We also develop environmental commodities. That's possibly what we're better known for, or historically we have been, such as carbon offsets, renewable energy credits, and increasingly we're getting involved in project and technology finance projects too. We take our clients, both particularly in the private sector, but also in the public sector, along what we call the climate leadership journey, and it focuses on how they can take action, very tangible action, to reduce their environmental impacts. For example, to take setting science-based targets, taking a net zero position, but most importantly, to advocate for others to take action to really accelerate positive change. And with that in mind, let's consider the recent explosive growth in climate commitments. And there has been an exponential surge in the last year or so. We are close to 1,500 major corporates who have signed up to science-based targets and also to TCFD, which is disclosures in line with that, or a framework that's been created by the investor community to help better understand how businesses are both managing, but also managing the risks of climate change, but also taking advantage of the opportunities that a low carbon agenda offers. And interestingly, very recently, there's also been a recent survey that's shown about 1,500 businesses have made commitments towards a net zero future too. And if we continued on this exponential growth, by 2025, there will be over 10,000 major global businesses that have made these big stretching climate commitments. And why is this particularly important? It is because we are facing a huge ambition gap. Despite the positive steps of the Paris Agreement, we're still facing a large ambition gap between the pledges and what needs to be done to limit warming to well below 2 degrees, if not a 1.5 warming ceiling. There are other mega trends that are driving these commitments. The Paris Agreement itself, about to enter into force, the investor focus on resilience and sustainability, and of course that's been accelerated by COVID. The political focus on Build Back Better and talk of a Green New Deal, especially in European dimension, and the fast growth in public awareness and the cultural shift in perceptions around climate change and sustainability more generally. And all of these issues are putting unprecedented pressure on corporates to take a long-term position on climate change, to de-risk, but also to seize the opportunities of this low carbon agenda. So with all this in mind, I'm pleased to say have a very distinguished panel of speakers who are going to be giving their perspectives and case studies on how their businesses have taken action on climate change. We have a very packed agenda, so we'd strongly encourage everyone to try and stick to time so we can get in as many questions as possible. Each of the speakers is going to introduce himself in detail, but I will just summarize and introduce very briefly. So we're going to start with Marie Gustafsson. She's at South Pole, a senior sustainability consultant. She is going to introduce the Nordic platform and also pose you a question, which we'd welcome your response to. Emily Otlander will speak about science-based targets and the 1.5 degree business playbook for climate action. She's the Climate Action Program Manager at Ericsson. We're then going to have Leah Rankinen. She will speak about, again, science-based targets, but for a food manufacturer and its supply chain. She is the Sustainability Director at Paulig. We're then going to take a couple of questions and then pass over to Nina Eloma. She will speak about science-based targets and a climate roadmap for a major retailer. She is the Senior Vice President of Sustainability at SGroup. And then finally, we're going to have Andreas Ahrens, and he will speak about the climate positive journey at IKEA. And he is Head of Climate at IKEA. That's no small task. Then we're going to have as much time as we can for questions in our Q&A session. And we want to make this, relatively informal and make it a discussion. So please pose your questions in that vein, if you like. So without further ado, I'm going to get things rolling by passing over to Marie Gustafsson, and she's going to introduce the Nordic platform. Marie, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, and good morning, everyone. My name is Marie Gustafsson, as Charlie mentioned, and I am a senior consultant at South Pole in Stockholm. And I'm one of the main organizers of the Nordic platform for mobilizing climate finance from South Pole side. And we are delighted to have so many people attending today and to host these four prominent speakers. And before we'll start with the presentation, I'll give a brief introduction to the Nordic platform for mobilizing climate finance, which is the framework in which this webinar is hosted. So the Nordic platform for mobilizing climate finance, long title, is coordinated by South Pole under the auspices of the Nordic Councils of Ministers, which is Nordiska ministerrådet for those of you who speak and understand Swedish. And the background to this initiative are the Helsinki Principles and the Nordic Vision of 2030 with a strong focus on climate action. And with these ambitions, the Nordic Working Group of Climate Action and Air in the Nordic Council of Ministers have initiated and sponsored this platform. And although finance is a prominent part of the title, the mission has two legs. So one is to involve and engage with the financial sector, and the other one is to do the same for the corporate sector, and therefore this webinar focusing on corporates. The overarching goal of the platform is to highlight areas where the Nordic corporations within the Nordic Council of Ministers can support the road towards the Nordic countries' climate neutrality targets. And the platform is doing this by hosting this series of webinars followed by a workshop where corporates and financial institutions can share their experience and challenges and provide then also inspiration and learnings to fellow actors in the community. And then in total now we have around 25 organizations, corporates and other actors across 7 webinars who will be sharing their experiences. And the key outcome is, of course, that the learnings and the conclusions from these discussions will also distill into recommendations for the Nordic governments. And this is the background to the questions we asked on the registration page, which you might remember, regarding if the Nordic governments has any role to play in SBT setting. And I will come back to this in the break. So without further ado, I will hand over to introduce the first speaker of the day, Emily Elander at Ericsson. Please go ahead, Emily.
Thank you so much, Marie. Can you hear me well? Hopefully, yeah.
Yes.
So my name is Emily Elander, and I work for Ericsson as a Climate Action Program Manager. So today I wanted to talk about, firstly, about what Ericsson is and how we work with sustainability, but then go into our targets within science-based targets and how we work with climate action through this 1.5 degree business playbook. So for you who do not know, and many think that Ericsson still do mobile phones, we do not do that anymore. So we are one of the leading providers of information and communication technologies to service providers, basically meaning we're providing the technologies so we can have good mobile networks and also private networks for companies, so we can call in on mobile phones, but also for companies who needs private networks for secure access, having Internet of Things within their, for example, smart manufacturing operations. So we have a lot of exciting and really good technologies that we work with that also can enable climate action, which I will come back to later. So as you see here on the first slide, from the sustainability point of view, our vision is that we really want to empower an intelligent, sustainable, and connected world. And from our sustainability area within Ericsson, we work with 3 things. So we have the responsible business, looking into responsible business in terms of minerals, how we source them, chemicals, etc. We have environmental sustainability, which I work with. We work with our products, reducing energy consumption with our climate action, also chemicals here, modularity, circularity within our different programs. But then we also have digital inclusion, where we work with partnership, for example, with UNICEF to provide school connectivity for school children, but also humanitarian responses after disasters, like going out after hurricanes to provide the connectivity so our humanitarian workers can connect and communicate through digitalization, so they can actually provide their response to the natural disaster and help people at the spot. So when we work within my area of climate action, we think of climate action within 3 ways. First, we look at the Ericsson own impact, what we can do, our operations, how we can minimize climate there. Our products and industry impact come as a second horizon. You see in the big, large circle in the middle. And then we look on the impact of society, our technologies. How can we, through partnership, create even more climate action? And if we go to the next slide, I will go into this a bit more visually. So when we start with, Ericsson always base our climate action work within science. So we always start with a life cycle analysis. Here you see the one we have for 2019, last year, looking into where is our biggest impact within our own footprint from cradle to cradle. So as you see here, above 80% of our impact is from products in operations, and then also from operator activities together. So what we can do for our customers can enable climate action in such much bigger ways than if we only look at our own business and our own operations. So on the right-hand side, you see here, we have, for our products in operation, we have several climate action targets. We're looking into being 10 times more energy efficient in our 5G portfolio than 4G by 2022. But we also have a science-based target. You can see it as an intensity target. So we want to, by 2022, we need to be 35% more energy efficient in our legacy Ericsson radio system portfolio than we were 2016. So we're driving our products involvement as well. And Marie, if you just go to the next slide, I can just show what our customer need to deal with. So I talked about, needing to call in your mobile phone. For our customers, their biggest energy bill problem is the cost of the energy bill, but that is also relation to their climate action. So their biggest impact is running their networks. And as you see, for each generation where we have launched 3G, 4G, and now 5G, if you do it in the same way and just adding new equipment on site, you will have a huge increase in energy consumption. But Ericsson have actually thought of a holistic perspective and approach to break the energy curve for our customers. So we want to break this curve, going down from 5G basically to the same level as we have energy consumption for 4G in total of the whole networks. So we work with our customers to have that, and it's really important for us because it's the biggest impact we can do directly in relation to our business. So that's why we work with our customers in that. If you go back again, Marie, thank you so much. Hopefully you understood that as well. So that's why it's really important that we work with our science-based target for our products as well, but also working with our customers to really try to optimize their network so we can reduce emissions even further. For the second biggest after our customers' impact, we have the suppliers, in which we got a new target last year that is not science-based, but is still a target aligned with science, is that we want that by 2025, 90% of the emission generated by our suppliers, those suppliers should have 1.5 degree aligned climate targets. And we say 1.5 degree aligned, we go with the carbon law, meaning halving emission by each 10 years. So halving emission by 2030, 2040, and then 2050. And that is a bit more aggressive than the science-based target 1.5 degree trajectory, but it's easier for our suppliers to understand, and it's also backed by science. So I'll go into that a bit more in the next slides. But when we work with climate action, just go back, sorry, Marie, I was not done. We also need to clean our own house, and I think it's important. I just wanted to give you this big picture when we talk about this, because it's important when you see companies who say they have science-based target, 1.5 degree aligned or 2 degree aligned, you need to know where is the boundary, right? So when Ericsson, we have these different targets, but you see our biggest impact is the product in operation. So if we only talk about science-based target in our own activities, that's not enough. So I want you to take that with you when you see other presentation and go out into the world and discuss this. So we wanted to show within Ericsson that we also want to improve our own activities. We have a big impact, but when you see in the big picture, it's not as big, but of course it is, because we are a huge corporation with 100,000 employees. So we have a science-based target that we set in 2016, and it was approved in 2017. That is 1.5 degree aligned, and it was aligned that from the beginning, and that is by reducing 35% in our by 2022 from our own activities with a 2016 years baseline. And our own activities is what you know, fleet vehicles, so scope 1, energy consumption within our facilities, so scope 1 and 2, but then also 2 areas, product transportation and business travel, who is scope 3 as well. So because we think that we can align and also improve business travel and product transportation, we have included that in our own activities and have not divided it by the scopes. So those we have 1.5 degree science-based target on. We also put on direct operation, meaning fleet vehicles and facility energy usage, to be carbon neutral by 2030, to show a long-term commitment. And the reason why we did the long-term commitment and we haven't done it for science-based target is that, you know, our industry is changing quite fast. So we only have 5-year strategy targets within Ericsson. So the 2030 target is more a normality. So perfect. I will go to what we actually can do more within the industry. So if you go 2 steps ahead, Marie. Perfect, thank you so much. Remember I talked about, you know, how big your impact can be, and actually for the ICT sector, our footprint is only 1.4% of the global carbon footprint, but we can actually enable more climate action. You see today we're sitting online talking instead of traveling, and that is something that ICT sector and our technologies can enable. So Ericsson research actually shown that by 2030, we can enable 15% of the total greenhouse gas emissions reductions. That means that for the halving that we need to do by 2030, ICT technologies can actually enable 1/3 of that. So we at Ericsson works really a lot with this, like trying to work through partnership to enable climate action even more. So one of the things I wanted to talk about here was the 1.5 degree business playbook, which you see in the right corner. So if you go to the next slide, Marie, I will show what the business playbook is about. And here we're actually looking into how can Ericsson and our, not only our sector, but how can we enable climate action in society more. So we wanted to create this business playbook together with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative to try to support small and medium scale enterprises, but also big corporation and organization of how they can work with climate action. So we developed this framework, the business playbook, of how you can start to work with. And it's almost the same as we work in Ericsson as well. You first start with reducing your own emissions, having each 10 years, as I talked about. The second pillar is your value chain emissions, having those as well per 10 years. But then you also need to change how you work within your business. And then we have pillar 3, trying to integrate climate action within your business strategy, working on all levels. And then the 4th one, which was the one I talked about before, enable climate action in society. So we really get the momentum. And for ICT sector, this is using our technologies to enable even further climate action. For other industries, it could be something else, of course. But this playbook is a really good way, an easy way to understand how you can work and have the framework within your business to work with that. And we see that as complementary way for science-based targets. You can go 2 slides ahead, Marie. To support within your science-based target, because I personally believe the science-based target is a perfect way for you to get validation of your targets, to see it's really aligned with science, but also business playbook tells you, how you can align your targets to science as well. So you can do both. And also science-based target have had some problems in the past, gaining momentum from the small and medium scale enterprises. And I think it's really important that we create momentum for everyone, and everyone needs to act now. So I think, using the business playbook or go into the new initiative that Race to Zero have started together with ICC, the SME Climate Hub, is also a really good way of getting your targets aligned with science, and then how you can work and support your business as well. I think for large corporations, it's easier to do this and just agree to science-based target, but smaller and medium scale businesses need more support. So I think this is a really good way of interconnect with different initiatives. Yeah, and I think that is all for me, Maria. I hope we will get some questions because I wanted to be fast so we get more time for Q&A. I will go a bit earlier today because I need to go to another session. So please come with a question if you have any after in the Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Emily, thank you. That was illuminating. What's really interesting is just how you've considered the bigger picture of your influence, and you recognise that a lot of your footprint is in the wider value chain, but you've really sought to influence that in a very positive way by creating the tool like the playbook to partner up with the smaller suppliers, for example, and also considered the wider SDG, Sustainable Development Goal impacts of your activities. So that's fantastic to see. Thank you. Now over to Leah to talk us through Paulig's SBT initiative. Thanks.
So thank you very much, and happy to be here today. Hopefully you can hear me well. My name is Leah Rankinen, and working as a Director of Sustainability and Public Affairs at Paulig. And just a couple words about it. Paulig is the over 140 years old family-owned company working in the food and beverage industry. And one of the biggest areas, business areas, is a good coffee. So remember, join that every day. So I will try to put you here in the big picture that what is the climate work playing a role into the bigger strategic approach, how it is linked to the Paulig business strategy in a well, and then about the experience in concrete, because this science-based target initiative and approval has been, it is quite new for us, started in the end of last year, and we just got it approval during the last summer. So I think it's a good moment to elaborate a little bit, very fresh experiences on that. So let's move forward and have a next slide. Just giving a big short introduction, kind of why climate issue there is playing an important role. Like I said, that this is a family-owned company, more than 140 years old. So there are quite clear areas that why we see that we need to play a big role in this climate work, that we want to generate that to the future generations too. And in a food business there is a big link to the climate change, but also from the food waste point of view here, kind of the other sustainability risks are quite well linked to that area. So let's move forward. And at the same time, to the next slide, we see that there is an imbalance globally between that. At the same time, we are using the resources too much, we are harming the climate, kind of we have a huge obesity and overweighting problems in the Western countries specifically. So how to be in that area. So I think my main message here is that how we formulated that our climate work is linking a lot of with healthy and human rights angles. And let's move forward for the next slide. Then there are definitely customers in all our markets where Paulig products are sold in 70 different countries globally. Especially millennials are looking for very good solutions over here. But also big customers, as Paulig is a supplier for many retailers in European market. So let's move forward to the next slide. This is a short introduction, and then I think the key message is that not staying there and looking at there are a lot of risks going on. It is kind of we see the bright future, and there that we can be really a big part of the solution. And there are different angles. We can be good for the people, good for the planet at the same time, but we need to make a really credible framework for that area to go forward, and it's a really long-term investment. And here it means that before going to the detail to the process, this is a big enabler actually there to do the climate roadmaps for the concrete level. And starting the science-based mechanism is that company has set the really high ambition to be the front runner in the area of food and beverage companies. The owners are willing to invest in this area. It means that this ambition puts the ambition high, that we know that it need to be, we are going to do the things into the future that we don't know the existing, at least today. And that's why it creates the innovation too, but also that it's a long-term investment there. So let's go to the next slide. And here we come to the area, and in the beginning, when we were launching this spring, the whole sustainability focus areas and ambitions for 2030, we didn't have a finalized SPD process yet, but we started it last autumn. And creating the three angles, because these are neglecting to each others. So we have targets for the own operations and for the whole value chain. Specifically, what was important message into the previous presentation too, that you need to look at the whole value chain there. And we thought that in this picture, all of these areas, we will start to look at the scientific frameworks which we can use, so creating the credibility, but also internally, it's really important that it gives us commonly used definitions for the areas and external validation. And the climate area has been the first one we have been starting to kind of making the external validation through science-based initiative. So that is my main message here, and learning from internally that before also going to the detail to the science-based process, it's really important that you have framed your own focus areas, and then the kind of strategy level approval is there, which areas you put the time and resources in the coming years. So let's move forward then, and the previous, I think, the value chain slide, or is it no, next one? Yes. So putting into the picture that from the learnings, when we started, like Paulig is operating own operations in 13 countries, but we buy nearly 1,000 different raw materials globally, apart from 80 different countries. So basically, this is very, very extensive. And when going through this kind of evaluations for preparing the science-based target, but mostly importantly, when starting to do the implementation roadmaps and defining the actions where to focus on and start, it is really important to have this overall picture. But then at the same time, the challenge is that which level we into the beginning we make the measurements and calculations when we don't have a specific data from each and every raw material supply chains. So for the baseline calculations, you need to find a proper conclusion. What is the good level to start the work and start the journey, and understand that it is kind of a forward, and you pick the biggest areas, you identify them, and then you go more deeper and develop your tools later on. But firstly, it's kind of understanding where the biggest areas are and where you start your new initiatives. So let's move forward. And the other thing during the value chain evaluation also was that very big learning for the internally for the whole organization was that I think the science-based process is very good for that you have a different business areas and you have people who are working with assortments and portfolios with many different kind of products that during this process you create the common understanding also of the picture. What is the matter of our own operations into the whole emission path, and what is the role of value chain, what is the role of raw materials, the packaging. And I think one of the big learnings for us has been that really creating the common understanding that we need to focus on raw materials, because from the different market point of view and consumer point of view, there are still a lot of things about that. From the climate area, the packaging is playing a big role, which is kind of a 5% role in our value chain emissions in the area. So with this extensive value chain looking, it's very clear that collaboration is needed with our employees, customers, suppliers, and even competitors into the future, because I think we are in a position that when implementing these areas, we need joint collaborative platforms also to develop the calculation methods, what kind of base information use, and what is the newest scientific data also to bring in from different food areas. So this is what we want to cherish, but it is also beneficial for us to use this when we talk about our customers. So let's move forward. Yeah, and taking that journey, identifying the supply chains and identifying and looking at the big picture internally, what is own operation role, what is the supply chain, raw materials, logistic role, was creating the common understanding actually and credible framework. But when we got the last summer then the approval from the science-based that we were the first Finnish food and beverage company in Finland to have approved science-based target, and those are in line with the 1.5 degrees. I saw enormous joy and proudness, which is, I think, very, very important, and we shouldn't underestimate ever that feeling that when issue strategic in company, that when you do something like this, people were really proud about it, that we have set the ambition high, and we are, as a family-owned company, we are among the front runners in globally. So it's a good way and example, then people then know and realize that yes, this is the level we are trying to reach. I can also start to look at in my own areas, what are maybe the new innovative ways to do things, what are the new innovative raw materials we can start to use into the products. So that is one of the very, very important learning, to make it as a joint effect actually. So let's move forward. And we have a couple of focus areas, and definitely now when these are approved, we have also integrated our climate actions. And the biggest initiative for the coming 3 years, we just integrated them to the whole company business strategy, which was approved last summer. All those initiatives are not public yet, but hopefully stay tuned and you hear them later on. But we also have some of the key focus areas. Some of has been there already long time, but we are continuing them. But with own operations, definitely those locations in 13 different countries, we still focus on energy efficiency and renewable energies there. But the big role is playing our R&D, product research and development, product portfolio development. So there is a strong focus inspiring plant-based products, which we see as a solution also for consumers to join in this work. And then in value chain, strong collaboration, starting with our biggest product areas. Like I said, that the coffee is important, but then also Tex-Mex area, we are the market leader in Europe in that area. So we are looking at them, watching them, starting the collaboration with the supplying players, the biggest one, and how to start to gather more detailed data also from there. But important message is also to summarizing all the time during the way that it's all that the longer term ambition is really important, that this is the 10 years journey going to be, but at the same time, so make it visible that what are the achievements also already. So that keeps the motivation high internally. That gives you the benefit when you communicate that during the journey with your customers and other stakeholders at the same time. So let's go to the probably the last one, no, the previous. But from here, the learning is that showing also the achievements there and kind of the, for example, some of the product areas we have, especially in Swedish market, Recenta are already 100% climate compensated. Compensation is not part of the SBT reduction targets, but then that could be added in some other product areas where we see that for the consumer it is an easy way to look at that. They don't need to think about it. So that's why I also believe that carbon neutral products are a good way to offer for consumers. But from the left side, I think the big learning has been now when shifting to also to the science-based world. We used to keep that, and there are in some products that when we have been doing the changes in our packaging, we can also calculate what is the effect from there for the carbon reductions. But knowingly, when we were creating the common understanding, the big picture of the climate effects and where are the areas we can make the biggest impact, that now everybody know that in the packaging area, the main focus is to increase that to the work that they are recyclable in future. So that will be the focus, that increasing the circularity in that area. So let's move the next one. And I think for here, the end was, and we had so many good discussions during this one page all the time. And from a previous experience, it is, you can use this in different level of organization, from the board, top management to the employer level on different departments, always. And and the challenge and idea is that understanding the areas, but then going deeper and deeper. Because, for example, from this picture, Paulig value chain, 97% emissions there. Definitely, we are going to focus on that. The target is to make the 50% absolute reductions there in 10 years. So raw materials are playing 75% role in that area. And so from that 75%, we know already what are the two biggest areas. So we will start to make that map, and doing that map that focus on those actions basically. And so tracking then the issues backward. Good, and let's go to the next one. So I think this is starting to be the end one. So a lot of internal work, learnings, skills, but then at the end, I think in these business areas, food and beverage, all the benefit is coming through how we succeeded there with the consumers actually, and what kind of a new innovative products we can actually launch there, and which have a less climate impact, which are kind of a low carbon products itself. So there are some award-winning innovation from our portfolio, plant-based protein, bullet oats. We are creating the new recipes, tasty vegan areas, and that's kind of how we can, from the dietary point of view and from the healthy point of view, make a big impact in different markets. So let's go. Yes. And from the supply chain point of view, I think from the earlier it's been a risk management angle, from climate, quite a lot of area from risk mitigation to safeguard how we can actually produce coffee coffee in the future. So now it's more or less when we have a science-based target, it's kind of starting the real forward-looking collaboration also for our suppliers and partners, that developing the data gathering models which we should use, and encouragement to the climate actions and initiatives. But this is definitely the area where we have some new initiatives on a planning. So not too much about this area yet, but there is a very good base collaboration what has been done. So now start to build on that, to the layers that we can track the real reductions, what has been done there in supply chains. So I think probably this was the last one. Yes, and all for this we are doing for a life full of flavor. So thank you very much. I was trying to highlight during the presentation some of the key learnings, and also from the maybe in the end some of the challenges point which are crucial. So I think in the bigger picture it is always that when you do the baseline, so which deep level you go with the data, you don't have it, and that's where we come to also to the Nordic collaboration, which I will highlight for the authorities into the future. Do that, how can we better use also the state-owned research centers data what they are having. For example, Sweden Rice Institute is having from different raw materials, but how can we benefit and collaborate in those areas much better, and creating the joint frameworks for really the calculation and reporting methods. So thank you very much.
Excellent, Leah, thank you very much. What's incredible is how fast you've come in such a relatively short space of time. You've achieved huge amounts, and I also, well, the point around the supply chain is absolutely, that slide you put up, I'm not surprised it gets a lot of discussion, that 3% only of your emissions are in your sort of operations and 97% in the value chain. And also the emphasis on the Sustainable Development Goals, again, thinking about the wider impacts on health, etc. That was something that really grabbed me in your presentation. We had a very interesting question around carbon neutrality. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that. What kind of balance do you want us to strike from reductions relative to offsets? Obviously, that's a question we get asked a lot as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think many are thinking about it nowadays, and climate neutrality or climate negative and positive things. But I think the first main target is, and we have a good position now, that we have a very good ambitious reduction targets, 50% value chain absolute target. We have a lot of things to do, and that makes it very, very credible, actually. And but we haven't decided yet any broader decisions how to move forward. And like I said, that we have strategic initiatives on the plans now, doing those kind of. But we definitely see that the biggest area need to be really reductions, and what we are building, like looking at the value chains and long cooperation with the coffee farmers, there are insetting possibilities, definitely, and we want to try to start to track the data now to actually see there might be neutrality already there existing. We want to learn it from that, not immediately going from the. But I personally, I believe, and from our operation, offsetting is going to be part of the solutions in coming years. We know it, but we want to carefully analyze and look at it, how we do it. We want to do it in a way that it is benefiting our value chains.
Yeah, I think we can explore this a little bit more in the longer Q&A at the end. There's also been a question around water supply and how that relates to CO2 savings. So perhaps we can tackle that. Yeah. Emily, if I could invite you to come back on. We've got a question that's come in for you before we move on. So could you describe how you decided what your own emissions should contain in setting your targets, i.e., what you are responsible for in terms of the operations and so on, as opposed to the wider value chain?
Yeah, I think so. This was I started in Ericsson last year, but what they've been telling me, and I also understand their approach, is that usually when a lot of companies are doing the carbon neutral claim, is usually to their own operations. That we also have, you have scope 1 and scope 2 that you are directly contained for. For Ericsson, we have the fleet vehicles that we go on to site for projects and network updates to support our customers that we own or are leasing directly, which are included in that. And then of course you have all our offices that we are usually not owning, but still leasing, as so many other companies do. You lease your operating space, so still it's not really a part of your boundary, but it's still there, right? Because we can affect our supplier in that sense, our operators of the building, to reduce energy. So I think that is quite contained and certain for a lot of companies. But what our management saw that for product transportation and business travel is also something directly in connection with Ericsson business, right? So we take the action of doing business travel, and we can decide not to do that. So of course that also needed to be a part of our science-based target for own activities. And it's the same for product transport. We include everything that Ericsson pays for. So basically the majority is from our hubs, assemblies to the customers. This also included. Then we also realized that we want to have the full value chain approach. So that's why we also now drive through our new target of the 90% of our emissions within the supplier should have 1.5 degree. And the reason why we don't have 100% is that Ericsson have 20,000 suppliers, where 450 stands for 90% of the emissions. So, we have a lot of this, one-person firms that go up and climb in the towers, then we can't really put that pressure on them to reduce their emissions. It's not realistic. What we see now is better that we focus on the big impact there again. But I really like Leah's approach, the absolute target reduction is, of course, the best one. And hopefully we can get to that as well. Definitely.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I think that's hopefully that will be a sort of common theme. I think we will explore that a bit further a bit later.
Yeah.
So before we move on to Nina, I'm just going to ask Marie to, she wants to present to you some findings of the question that we posed to you. So Marie, over to you.
Yes, so as part of the registration, we asked you the question, is there a role for Nordic governments to facilitating the setting of science-based targets? And even if there were many more registered, we received 50 answers to this question. And and so the majority have answered that yes, there is a role for Nordic governments to facilitate setting SBTs. But there is still a non-insignificant part of the answers actually saying no. And then there were some people also answering that there is partly or say limited role for the governments to participate in these initiatives. And I will not read all the quotes here in interest of time, but we received also a couple of interesting comments on the topic that either yes, governments could be assisting, but legislation shouldn't be there, or saying that larger corporates should be required to set SBTs. And we would be very interested to hear other inputs on this, so feel free to post that in the question box during the rest of the presentations. And with that, I will hand over to the next presenter.
Nina.
Right? Yeah, Nina, please. Yeah. Yes, Nina.
Nina, over to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you, and great to be part of the discussion. I think it's an interesting part for me to go to my presentation now after Lea's and Emily's presentations. and maybe then discussing more also about the kind of the supplier engagement forum that we have established. So my name is Niina Elomaa, and I've been working in SGroup as a SVP for sustainability only for 6 months now. So I have my background also in the food industry. So very much kind of recognizing the same topics that Lea was presenting previously, common areas there. But let's move on and have a look what SGroup is doing for their climate work right now. So it was presented that SGroup is related to the retail sector. Yes, definitely so. But I think it's also important to understand that even though that we are a big grocery store and a big retailer, we have also other kind of business areas which are included in the SGroup's climate work, as well as the retail sector. So we have also department stores, so we are #1 in those areas as well. We are Finland's most trusted bank, so we are in the banking sector. And then we have our service station or gas station, so we are also selling gasoline and also renewable fuels in our service stations. We have restaurants, and we are also in the hotel business, so those included in as well. And then also in the hardware trade, which is of course where we have a challenger position right now. So this kind of gives then the picture that we have quite a huge amount of different aspects when we are considering our climate work and what can we do. Let's move to the next slide. So our responsibility program is called The Best Place to Live. In Finnish, it's Paras paikka elää. And it has been in operation and coming to end actually by the end of this year. So we are right now also working for establishing then the next program period, reaching out to year 2030 according to the Agenda 2030 and SDGs. So let's move to the next to have a look on what it contains. So it contains 4 different sectors or themes: for the good of society, climate change and circular economy, ethical operating culture and human rights, and well-being and health. And of course, if we are now focusing on the climate change and the circular economy, one of the topics that we have been working for quite a long time, for many years already, is of course reducing emissions and being energy efficient and material efficient. What we want to also find is then the best solution and different solutions to reduce the impact that our operations have on the climate and on the environment. And then, of course, the development of sustainable production and raw materials. So these are very remarkable things and big things. And I think it's also important to emphasize that we have had the kind of targets and reduction targets for a long period of time. So it's in a way taking then the next steps and moving forward with our climate work that we are focusing right now. But then if we look at also the well-being and health part and of course what we can offer to the customers or consumers, it has an important role. What kind of products there are, how we can make the change towards the responsible consumption. So extremely important area. Let's move to the next. So our climate action, you can take the next slide already. So we set the target in 2019 to be carbon negative by 2025. So not only neutral, but negative. And this covers our own operations and negativity. And this, of course, means that when we consider our actions in the future, we need to be talking also about the removal of carbon. So it's not only reducing, but it's also removing, and we are talking about the compensation. But when we are focusing on our own operations, it's extremely important that we also focus to help and engage our customers towards the climate smart life, and at the same time encourage our suppliers and partners on setting in their climate targets. So having then the focus on our own operations, but thinking what is happening before us in the value chain, and also what is happening after us. So what the customers can do, and what is our role in that work. A big thing to consider. Let's move to the next slide. So how are we going to then reach the target, being the carbon negative? So our reduction target at the moment, which is of course SBT approved, is then to reduce our climate emissions from our own operations by 90% by 2030. This means that we are not able to go to zero, of course, and quite natural, but it requires then also compensation to be even the neutral. We need to have 100% renewable electricity by 2030, and this is something, of course, that we have at the moment already reached, but we need to keep on doing that. We need to focus also on our energy efficiency investments, so do that work that we have been doing, continue doing it, and then we have the compensation and carbon sequestration part. In order to be negative, we need to go for those solutions as well, and focus what we can reach. Let's move to the next. And of course, then again, the impact that we have. Not a surprising, Lea was talking about 97 and 3 previously. If you look at our emissions, the scope 3 is 98, and then our own operations 2. So, or the scope 1 and 2, 2%. And this was our emissions last year. But it looks probably the similar this year as well. But if you look at then what our climate impact is actually, and it's 12% of Finland's consumption-based emissions. And this is quite a remarkable figure to consider. And this gives us then the possibility to be impacting on the emissions when it comes to the consumption. But at the same time, it gives us the responsibility to act on these topics. So it's both the responsibility, but also then the possibility to make a change. So important to understand what our role is. Let's move to the next. So then if we go and look at then the climate action and our supplier engagement, we actually launched the Big Deal campaign a couple of years ago, and the reduction target was then set that we will reduce 1 million tons, or the value chain emissions will be reduced with 1 million tons of CO2 by 2030. This Big Deal campaign is not a campaign anymore. It has become a program, and the idea is basically that we have had a good collaboration with our suppliers, and we encourage them to actually set their science-based emission reduction targets. And I have to say that this kind of encouragement and engagement process that has been created has shown its power, and I will come back to that in the next slide. But it has really shown that the encouragement is a good way to push the suppliers to work on these topics, and it has a positive impact. So the dialogue is more or less continuous with our big suppliers. We also joined the SDP supply chain program, and of course asked our suppliers and to report their climate performance, and it has been going forward quite nicely. Seems to be also the encouragement is there a good tool to use. And then we are also, of course, offering the information and insights regarding the target setting and CDP reporting to our suppliers, what they can do, and we are having this kind of continuous dialogue and events with our suppliers who are part of the Big Deal program. Let's move to the next. So if we look at then the the collaboration, we have now 114 partners in the campaign or in the program, and already 54% have already set or plan to set their science-based climate targets, and already 59% reporting via the CDP supply chain program. And the recent figures from the CDP show that actually there has been an increase of 20% of the parties who are using it. So showing then that the encouragement and the kind of the collaboration way of working has really paid off and has been a good approach. So thanking then the whole SGroup team who have been kind of creating this type of collaboration model. I think it has shown its power. Let's move to the next slide. But then it's not enough that we talk with our suppliers. It's not enough that we do our own operations, but it's also kind of helping then the customers or consumers to follow their own purchases and what kind of CO2 emissions they are creating. So we have this app called My Purchase, and our customers are able to then follow the carbon footprint on their grocery purchases, what it has been, and also kind of then following it and making then the change if they are willing to do so. And the idea is to inform the customers on the footprint and then encourage, for example, to increase the share of vegetables in their diets. This has an impact on the, of course, on the climate, but it has also the positive impact to the kind of more healthy plant-based diet for our customers. So this is a very good tool to tell people what it looks like. But we also kind of need to further develop then these tools and these apps. Okay, and then the next slide. But what else are we then doing? I want to emphasize also that we are investing in the renewable electricity production. So we have wind and solar power, and we are actually one of the biggest, or we are the biggest producer of solar power in Finland. And we are also supporting climate research for creating the carbon sequestration verification system that will enable the emission compensation in the farmland. So this has been also one of the topics that we have been focusing. So finding then the new compensation methods and finding the solutions for the carbon sequestrations. I think that was the last slide. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. That's really heartening to see how you've led this agenda for so long across all of your disparate businesses. You know, you've engaged your suppliers, your partners, and also your customers. Plus, of course, you're seeing the opportunities in the low carbon agenda, investing in renewable energy and so on. So it's a very interesting collection of stories there across the whole board, and we'll explore that a little bit more in the Q&A in a bit. But I think we need, in the interest of time, we need to move on. So I would like to invite our final speaker, Andreas, to take the floor, please. Thank you.
Hey, hello and good morning, or maybe good day to you all. So my name is Andreas, and I lead the global climate agenda for the totality of IKEA, everything from our raw materials to the end of life. And it's really nice to see so many other companies really taking that value chain responsibility. I will try to brief you and inform how's the IKEA journey from setting our goals and then implementing them to reach our goals. So I'll go from setting the goals and then really down into the actions we are taking today. So yeah, and please share any questions you have. So the basis, I mean, our sustainability strategy, it's based on main challenges in society where IKEA can have an influence. So how can we address a healthy and sustainable living for more than 1 billion people within the limits of the planet by 2030? How can we work with fair and equal human rights, for instance, throughout the value chain by 2030? And then the whole transformation, both the circular economy and addressing our climate footprint. And there, the commitment to become climate positive is what I am leading for IKEA, and I'll deep dive into today. Next slide. So what climate positive means for IKEA is that we will reduce more greenhouse gas emissions than the whole value chain emits while growing the IKEA business. And this is important. I mean, we as a business, we want to continue to grow, but we can't do it on expense of the planet or people. And we will also do this completely without carbon offsetting practices as well. And I'll brief you a bit how that works as well. Take the next slide. And the whole basis of our climate agenda is our commitment to limit climate change to 1.5. And this is a responsibility both for us to cut our emissions in half by 2030, but also how IKEA can contribute with additional reductions in society. For instance, how we can sell solar panels to customers or take a more holistic responsibility down into our supply chain and not just what can be accounted for IKEA business. And of course, we are supporting, due to this, the business ambition for 1.5, the exponential roadmap 1.5 supply chain units that Emily talked about, and have set a science-based target for 1.5. But in the essence, I mean, the science is in the IPCC report. These are more initiatives to verify that we're on the right track. So let me guide you through the whole climate positive journey of IKEA. Next slide. So first of all, I think it's been really good and stated by many companies here that we as a business, we have a responsibility for every impact we have on climate change. I think historically, we've talked about scope 1 and 2 emissions, and anything that's upstream or downstream in our supply chain is kind of handled like somebody else's emissions. But all of these emissions are to us as a company who have operations, and it's our responsibility. So of course, from an accounting perspective, we at IKEA, we talk about scope 1, 2, and 3, but that's not how we work. We work with how does our business impact climate change, and this is how it is. Anything from the materials, how they're extracted and processed, how they end up in production, the manufacturing of our suppliers to turn into the billy bookcases, the meatballs, you name it. How they're then transported to the stores, where you as a customer, hopefully, visit us and purchase things at IKEA. And also how customers get to the store. That's also our responsibility. Where do we set the stores? And of course, also the electricity consumption of lighting and appliances at home. That's also our responsibility, as well as are the products possible to recycle. And this means a lot why it needed to take this responsibility, because in total, we have 24.9 million tons of CO2. It's a gas, kind of difficult to grasp, right? But in comparison, it's roughly half of Sweden's footprint, or 0.1% of the whole world's emissions. And I think those comparisons really make sense. And it's also nice to see SGroup make the same, because it also shows the importance of us as a business, me, you, we're us at IKEA, but also you here in the audience, why our action really matters. So with this in mind, this is what we need to address from IKEA. So next slide. So at IKEA, if we don't do anything, look into our baseline 2016 and just continue as is until 2030, we will almost have tripled our emissions or tripled our climate footprint. And this can't continue. So the first and most important part in our journey to become climate positive is to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this is also what's part of the science-based target commitment today. Main movements here, striving towards 100% renewable energy, so electricity in operations, for fuels in transport, fuels in production, etc. Another one is also using more sustainable materials and food, such as renewable and recycled material, or finding alternative protein for meat. And the third one is addressing sustainable consumption and enabling a circular economy, where you prolong the life of products instead of buying and discarding products every time. But in addition to this, to be able to cut our emissions in half, we also need to remove CO2 from the atmosphere and store it through forestry, agriculture, and products. And this is possible for IKEA to do within our own value chain, because we source 1% of all commercial wood and 1% of all cotton that's grown globally. So huge possibilities here to improve management practices instead of investing in carbon offsets. Then the remaining part to become positive and reduce more than we emit is the reductions in society. And this will reduce without carbon offsets, but rather, how can we sell, for instance, solar panels to customers addressing the total climate footprint of a home, but also when we work with our suppliers, not just looking into our business share of what they produce, but looking into their total factories or total operations if they are a transport supplier. And through this more holistic approach, we really address actual emissions in society and not relying on renewables. So this is what we're set out to do. Next slide. Of course, when we started, many questions to ask. Of course, we are part of the problem and then we're part of the solution, but can we even reduce our emissions in absolute terms? And how do we track? I mean, if we've set a goal and how we measure our greenhouse gas emissions, can we really see? I mean, if we increase recycled content in the material, are models able to, capture those movements? So that was really critical, as we spent 1.5 years roughly to revisit all models. So what we would like to drive and steer also is reflected in our climate models, and not just based on rough estimations, but trying to be as precise as possible, but also being open to where maybe it's a bit tricky to get very accurate information, mainly within supply chain and materials. We have to use a lot of averages. So we worked through that and then got it approved, and then anchored it throughout all management levels before we committed and announced it externally. And now we're on a journey to, of course, integrate into business, and we continue to learn and develop step by step. This is a complex topic, so it's not something that you learn overnight. Next slide. So a bit where we are today, we spent a few years there to both revisit the models and set the goals and anchor them. And now we're on a journey of roughly 5 years. So we're integrated into business and develop our competence. And a huge movement here is setting roadmaps. So in addition to having goals down on every managerial level, both within purchasing or product development or in retail, we also set hands-on roadmaps. So based on the goal that's set, what can each part of organization contribute with? And it's owned very deep down in the organization. So it's not driven from top management. Really secure that grassroots movement and ownership, because it's only there where we'll make the magic happen. And hopefully we will finish this by 2023, sorry, not 2030. And then it's just to do all the actions that we've identified. So let me go through a bit what we mean with the climate roadmaps. So first of all, we really need to develop this with business and suppliers. And when I mean business, it's not top management, they are on board, but this is down to each, mainly you say mid-management level, but also below that as well. So that each person who owns and leads a business feels confident with both the goal that they have set and also the actions needed to reach it. And we also do the same with our suppliers, especially the ones where are prioritized and potentially prioritized for us, which are strategic partners. And together, we create an understanding of what's really behind their footprint and what actions should they take to address the climate footprint. Or maybe where is it maybe difficult? Could be legislation, could be policy, and then we can drive that through our public affairs instead. And then based on this, we together prioritize and set the portfolio of projects and actions so that they feel the ownership of this as well. So it's not me leading it, but they. So I'll try to just give you a bit of a crash course on how we're doing this as well. So next slide. So to do this, now this might scare you, but don't be scared. So we actually had to develop a simulation tool So based on the data we collect from our direct suppliers, which you see here, we could then simulate and forecast based on their business growth, what their emissions are today and what they will be in the future. So on the right-hand side, you see the total energy consumption. You see most is coming from natural gas and electricity, some the forklifts that they have at the factory. And on the left-hand side, you see the climate footprint of this. Most probably that electricity is coming from coal because it has a higher footprint than natural gas. So what should we do? This doesn't look good, right? So next slide. Well, we can always try to improve energy efficiency, right? I mean, doing less harm. Well, that will take us somewhere, but we're still not there. I mean, we have set the goal of minus 80%, and in line with science, it should be at least minus 50%. So, okay, what more can we do here? So we have an energy efficiency improvement here, but what more can we do? Next slide. Okay, we thought, well, what if we change all the heating in the factory to geothermal heating? That's renewable, not fossil as natural gas. And what we see in the energy consumption remains the same. We just replace natural gas with geothermal heating. But then the climate footprint of natural gas, it kind of just disappears there towards halfway to 2030. So that's a good step. So, but we need to do more. So what more can we do? Next slide. Whoops, there's something happened. So here we actually managed to source 100% renewable electricity with the supplier as well. And it's possible in most markets, but some it's really challenging. So already here, we know that we can reach 80%, but we can also do one more step. Next slide. We can also electrify the forklifts, and voila, we have completely eliminated the greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm not saying this is easily done, but what it really shows is that if you set the methodology right and how you calculate it, it's really easy to identify what are the main actions. And already here, you can say, maybe the supplier should only focus on electrifying their forklifts and securing renewable electricity. So that's 2 actions. Well, as energy efficiency sometimes maybe 40 actions, and it's kind of tricky to prioritize. But here, 2 actions in your home. Next slide. We also sliced from a global level, so how much in production is coming from electricity and how much is fuels for production. And you can see on-site solar panels, well, it provides 15% reduction, but we do actually also for suppliers need to find renewable electricity. So this sets from a global perspective, what are the strategic movements? And we can continue to slice the elephant even more. So if you take the next slide. We can also play Lego with material footprint. Now, I hope Lego excuses us for this expression, but I mean, if you look into material footprint and use LCA data, you can look into this emission factor. Here, it's for particle board, which is used for billy bookcase and all wardrobes. So by 3 actions, you can pretty much address most of the footprint, increasing recycled content. We can address the glue, which is a huge part, with a renewable version. And we can work with our board manufacturers to secure 100% renewable energy. And we have really reduced the footprint of particle board, which is a huge part of IKEA's footprint. So really to make it tangible. Next slide. So this is what we've done for the totality of a value chain. We really looked into each part of a value chain, securing a methodology that we can steer on and simulate, and created this portfolio of main movements we need to drive and anchor it with the local business owners so that they take lead for it, while some projects are needed to drive on a more global agenda for the totality of it. So this really makes it easy to slice the elephant and really go into action mode, which is where we are today. Next slide. So where are we now? We're finalizing this portfolio of projects and actions. We're kind of halfway through right now, and we'll hope to finish it by the end of our financial year, which is end of August next year. We need to set the methodology for carbon removals and storage because there is no globally consensus for a corporate standard on this one. So here we're part of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol to develop this. And what we really need to do to enable business owners to lead is also that we have an automatized performance and follow-up system for our business, which is today done very manually and it's not so fun to work that much in Excel. So we can do a lot better here with smart systems. So that's a bit of a crash course into how we've been working for IKEA. Exciting. So yeah, we can skip this. So that's it. When we can really drive these moves. And for instance, it also needed to address your whole accounts or your icons within your company. So I really wanted to send that as a final signal to all of you as well. I mean, for IKEA, the meatball was a really true icon, and people told us don't touch that when we started 4 or 5 years ago. And here we are with a plant-based version, which has only 4% of a climate footprint compared to the meat-based version. Thank you.
Thanks, Andreas. It sees that the sacred cows aren't always so sacred when it comes to dealing with climate change. A couple of things that I really enjoyed about your presentation and the activities you've been taking is, first of all, you're using scenario analysis, and this is fast growing, particularly with likes of the TCFD, and looking forward about the impacts of climate change. And I like the way you're systematically doing that, and you're aiming to automate it across the whole business. I mean, that's no mean feat. And the second thing is you're thinking about the so-called handprint of your activities. If you distribute solar panels and so on, then potentially that can help offset or balance out emissions elsewhere. So we're now into the Q&A, but I'd like to sort of ask you an initial question, which is, yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about that handprint approach? Is that something that you feel is going to be a big part of your ultimate, like workbook, if you like, to tackle climate change?
Well, definitely, but I wouldn't say the handprint should be used to offset or balance our emissions as well. So our firm standpoint is that any net zero goal needs to happen within the value chain, primarily through emission reductions. The handprint is rather how we as a company have an opportunity to produce additional reductions in society. I mean, we're facing maybe humanity's greatest challenge ever. So of course we need to do our responsibility and cut the emissions down, but we also need to do our utmost to reduce as much as possible in society. We have that opportunity, so let's take it. It's not an accounting exercise. I think we need to move away from that.
Yeah, nicely said. Could I invite the other panelists to join us too? We're running very close to our time limit. However, we would invite you to stay a bit longer if you can, possibly for another 10 minutes, so we can explore some questions with you. Nina, could I ask you, question we had is, how do you engage you talked about the 50 to 60% of your suppliers that have engaged in setting CDP and science-based targets. How do you think you can get the other 40%, or are they going to be more difficult to tackle?
Maybe they are more difficult to tackle. I think that one of the things what we have noticed is that when you are, what they need is actually a lot of discussion and kind of a help and support. And that's one of the things that we have been discussing lately, that how can we support them? They are, I think that it's also part of the, let's say, the bureaucracy, the kind of the administrative burden that they are concerned about when it comes to setting the SPTs and going for the CDP reporting. But I think it's the encouragement, the discussion, and also getting then the support and views from other companies and how they have done it and how they have survived. So I think that in this sense, for example, this type of webinars and discussions together with other companies can help them to identify that, okay, they have done it, I can do it as well. It's encouragement, but I think that for me it was really positive to see that you don't have to kind of put a strict requirement, but just to encourage that, consider it. And I think that the overall the discussion that what has been on the climate change is of course then putting the companies in the position that they have to consider these topics. And I think that what Andreas you just said, I think it was brilliantly put, that we have to get away from this this kind of thinking that this is a calculation rehearsal, but also to help and support and find the ways that how we can make the change. So we have a big role to play in this, and I think that we have identified that. And when I say we, I don't mean SGroup, but I mean like companies have identified that we have the possibility to do it and support and help and engage. We have to put all kind of different parties, the customers, the suppliers, the companies, the governments. Everybody needs to be on board on this topic.
Thank you. Andreas, is there something you'd like to add to that in terms of how you engage your
I echo Nina on that one. And I think when you're engaging with suppliers, I mean, they are people, and not just like any other person who's subject to change. You'll have early adopters, you have the late adopters, and it's the same. I think it's an equal amount of requirements and encouragement as well, and the key is dialogue and talking together. They are part. They are not like you and me relation, but it's together. And some will be triggered and maybe already share your values. We had a supplier that's already 100% renewable since 8 years ago because they were visionary. Some suppliers need to put as a requirement, like you need to set, like, this is our climate goal on you, and what you need to follow up, or there will be business consequences. So it's a balanced approach, but think about from a change mentality, how would you get people on board? And it's the same.
Yeah, point well made. And how about senior business leaders? And I'm thinking, particularly in difficult times, possibly like now, how do you maintain that momentum? Nina, you've been at this a long time, or both of you have, but or your businesses. So how do you just keep the consistency of the message and so on, and the prioritization?
Well, I think from IKEA side, there's been no issue from top management. I think it was even they who, when we faced the COVID-19 crisis and still experience it, they signaled directly to us that we're not budging from our goals. I think it's more of a signal you need to send maybe to the middle management as well, which gets many signals from the top to just reaffirm that our goals are set. And I mean, if you're really aware of how climate change will impact your business, and if you think long term about your business, you will see that that's a bigger effect on your business than the emergency that we're trying to, or a crisis we're in right now. So it's been no issue for us, but I think it's good always to re-emphasize it.
I think that if I consider it from the SGroup point of view, and also in my previous positions, I think that the important part is that when you have this kind of topics in the strategy, in the business strategy of the company, it makes it a lot easier. So when it's kind of included, when the sustainability is there in the strategy, then it's easier to talk about. And I think one of the things, of course, during this COVID situation has been that people are considering that how the COVID has been affecting the business. But I think that there has been more and more discussion also about, okay, what comes next? What is then the next kind of, let's say, COVID in the brackets that is coming? Is it the climate? Is it then the biodiversity loss? Or what are we talking about? So the big things that can change the way that we do the business and what is affecting the business, they can be different. And I think this understanding is becoming more and more kind of understandable to everybody, that it can be something else that is hitting the world next, and we don't yet know what it is. I don't want to be gloomy, but I think it also makes sense then to say it out loud that, okay, this was now COVID, but it can be something else. And we have the possibility to make the change and find a solution. So I think that is something that needs to be just emphasized all the time in the discussions with the management.
And I think the emphasis on science in setting targets, inevitably there will be, there are working groups on science-based targets for other practices or other sustainability challenges. And I think that's just going to re-emphasize the impact that each of us has individually or as businesses, and then also the action that we need to be taking to do our bit to go further more. Can we pick up on another question, which is around neutrality? and the use of offsets as opposed to other mechanisms, and also how that feeds into your SDG targets, Sustainable Development Goal targets. How do you choose which types of projects to use, and what balance should be struck in terms of prioritizing them and choosing them?
You go ahead, Nina.
Oh, sorry.
Choosing offset projects, and also how that ties in with your SDGs, the use of setting targets for the Sustainable Development Goals. How would you go about
choosing? I think that when you look at then the Sustainable Development Goals, I think that there are of course areas where you're focusing on mostly, but I think important part is not to pick some, but to have a look on all of those. And then when you are talking about the offsetting and the ways to do that, and talking about the compensation, we are at the moment in the situation that the methods that we are using are those that are kind of accepted, but we are looking into those that are under development. And I think one of them is then the kind of those that are related to forestry and agriculture. So we are very much interested on those areas as well. But it is still on the kind of on the roadmap how we are going to get there, what kind of compensation and offsetting methods we can use in the future. That remains to be seen. But we have been piloting different type of approaches and will continue to do so. But the kind of the thing that what we see is extremely important is that there is a kind of a ground rules and a kind of a level playing field on that area as well, because there is at the moment not approved methods and that can be used for compensation and offsetting, and I think it's important that those will be developed so that there is a kind of a common understanding what is okay and what is not. So there is still a lot of discussion and a lot of kind of regulation or some kind of regulation needed on that area, is my view.
Andreas, something you'd like to add?
From our side, I mean, IKEA, we've taken a position to not use carbon offsets. We will, I mean, have removal practices and improved forest and agricultural practices within our value chain, of course. But I think when it comes to purchasing of carbon offsets, why we are not doing it from IKEA is coming at this is a business transformation, and what our impact on climate is as a business. While I mean, so it's not an accounting exercise. We also see, I mean, there's quite a problematic situation, both with, I mean, how do you secure permanence of these investments, and also when you purchase carbon offsets, you kind of take into account removals several decades into the future. And what happens if we have an increasing rate of forest fires due to climate change, I mean, or to beetle infestation, that whole can just go up in the air. And also we have 10 and 30 years to reach our goals by 2030, 2050. And how do you, I mean, if you include offsetting practices on the removals you need to reach in the coming 10 years, and it maybe takes 40 years for them to fill, you'll already from today in 2060. And that is after 2030 and 2050 goals as well. So it's a huge problematic also that you're allowed to include future removals and not just what have been historically secured as well. And I think that also needs to be guidance on as well. But overall, from our side, it's really to take our responsibility, how our business contributes to climate. We still make investments in forest restoration projects, but that's from our side more philanthropic activities, and we won't use it in any way to reach our climate positive commitment.
I have to agree with what Andreas is saying, and that's exactly what I meant with the needed kind of rules on that how they can be used. And I want to emphasize also the fact that we have to go first for the reduction before we go to the removal. So the reduction is the number one. So you can't kind of pay yourself out from this, in a way. So you have to do the reduction. But I think it's extremely important to support the kind of the research on this area, to see that what are then the possibilities, and to have the kind of the good rules and kind of rules of the game in this area. So I think that's what we are trying to do, and be kind of a front runner in this area as well, to see that what can be done, what are then the possibilities, because when you are doing the reduction, there comes something that you can't reduce anymore, and then you are in the situation that then you can do something else and do something extra. And I think that's also very, very good. But it requires a lot of development still, what is okay and what is not, and that calculation needs to be done by the scientists, and we have to then trust on their work on that area. So fully agree what you, Andres, were saying about the kind of reduction need. Definitely first the reduction before removing.
Yeah, and I mean that's very much the principle that we take at South Pole. Is, you know, any net zero climate neutrality ambition has to be underpinned by ideally a 1.5 degree trajectory, and that's where the emphasis has to lie to start with. Once you're on track, then, you know, we do face this emissions gap, you know, and that has to be, we have to supercharge our action, you know, and financing climate action is a very positive way of doing that, but it can't, you know, be at the expense of real action on the ground, within the business. Well, sadly, that wraps us up. We are beyond time, but I have to thank you both, and our other two speakers in absentia. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your very valuable insights. Yeah, to you and to everyone else, encourage you to keep up the good fight. You know, it feels like we're just rolling our sleeves up and continuing the fight against climate change. And you know, it's great to hear such significant businesses taking such you know, leadership positions. So thank you for your time, and look forward to following up these conversations.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Thank you.
All right, all the best.
All the best.
We'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.